Our guest is a retired professor of English from Long Island University and has authored one of the most acclaimed books on Nollywood, Nollywood, the creation of Nigerian film genres. A Nollywood expert, a Nollywood lover, a Nollywood chronicler, if I may. Joining me from New York, please welcome Dr. Jonathan Haynes. Thank you so much, Dr. Haynes.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I've really been enjoying getting to know your YouTube channel a little bit, and I really like what you're doing. So pleased to be here.
Thanks a lot. One recent phenomenon I've seen I've only been watching Nollywood recently. So one phenomenon I've seen is that Nollywood is pretty high on woman power. You can see strong characters. The female characters are written better than the male characters, and that is in front of the screen. And behind the screen, you have leading producers and directors and editors, writers, all of them. So is it a recent phenomenon, or has it been there since the start?
It has been there since the start, and I've actually been aware of it all along because Amaka Igwe is somebody I've known since she was a television director, before she got into Nollywood, and she was a great power in television and remained a great power in television and also in Nollywood and in Nigerian media in general. Um, and she wasn't alone. There were a lot of pioneering, especially producer directors, but often women were producers. Peace Anyam Fibersima, Isong, there have been quite a few down to today where you have Moa Budu and a number of the very biggest players in the industry have always been women.
And what about in front of the screen? Because I haven't seen much of classic Nollywood, but from whatever I've seen, I guess classic Nollywood maybe was a bit more sexist. I mean, you have an entire genre of scandalous women, and there seems to be this Osborne snatcher trope, which seems to have been very prevalent at least earlier. Or was it that my choice of films was such that I didn't see the progressive female representation back then?
Uh, Nigeria is certainly a very sexist society, and everything comes out in the movies. So, there's an enormous amount of that, and even though there have been these very powerful women in the industry from the beginning, it doesn't mean that women trying to get into the industry don't face all kinds of problems as women. That's for sure. But Nollywood, it doesn't, it in general, Nollywood tends not really to take sides, or it takes all sides. It expresses various opinions on practically every matter you can think of. And this is one of them. So there's certainly a lot of films that are kind of rampantly sexist, but there are also a lot of films which show women being powerful, and the Nollywood pays attention to women's lives, which in itself is a tremendous thing. And very, very often that attention is sympathetic and kind of understanding. And so in general, Nollywood, I think, has well, it produces Nigerian society, reproduces it. But one thing, one thing it's done is provided images of women being freer than most Nigerian women are. And that's got a liberatory dimension to it.
It's interesting. So talking about Nigeria being sexist, then what would be the reason for women being at such important positions, at least in with regards to Nollywood? They're at the, you could say it's a women dominated industry. So how does that work? On one side there is the sexism, on the other side you also have women at the top, so, or in place positions of power.
Women dominated is a little further than I'd go, although, I've been told by some of the most thoughtful, kind of major directors and producers in Nollywood that when they think of their audience, they think it's women.
Mhm.
Um, and there was always an economic uh, rationale for that, which was that, especially at the beginning when the economy had cratered, and in lots of formerly middle class families, the man had lost his job as a civil servant or whatever he was doing. The woman was picking up the pieces by going into the market and doing something, coming back with some money. So it was the woman in the family who had enough money tied up in a wrapper to rent a film or to buy a film at the end of the week, and she was making the choices. So, you know, women were the biggest Nollywood fans, and they were also really the biggest consumers at the beginning. A lot of Nigerian cultures, especially the southern ones, and I'm thinking now of the Igbo, who again are socially are so crucial in Nollywood, and most of the powerful women I was just mentioning are Igbos, certainly Amaka Igwe. Um, anyway, this is a pretty common pattern for women to have a considerable degree of economic autonomy within the family. Again, traditionally, everywhere in Nigeria, pretty much everywhere in Africa, there was polygyny. So, multiple wives, each one of whom was kind of running her own operation, within her husband's compound. Each wife would have her own house and cook for herself and her children and raise her own vegetables. They would do some farming together. There were collective tasks, and the husband was expected to provide certain kinds of support. Um, but women always did a lot, and they always went to the market constantly, at least every 4 days in the Igbo context. And very often it was more often than that. So they're selling something there, something they produced, whether it's foodstuffs or something else, and they're buying and they have a social life. And women also had their own organizations of many kinds in which they could become powerful. Um, but it was not rare for women to actually become quite wealthy as traders, out of their life in the market, and often better off than their husbands. And, they could become kind of major economic players. So that model has always been there. It's not some innovation that comes with Western education or something like that. Colonialism, I mean, this has become a pretty commonplace thing to say, was mostly bad for women because the colonizers were extremely patriarchal themselves. I mean, we're talking about European cultures in 1900, which expected women to be locked up in the house and, taken out for decorative purposes only. They had a real hard time understanding it. Well, they didn't try to understand the rights and the powers that African women had. And as a result, and African men tended to collaborate with the colonizer in reducing these traditional roles that women had always played. But anyway, the model was always there in these cultures, and yeah.
That's